All right, today we're diving into a really fascinating case study on foreign direct investment. We're going to look at the incredible story of how one single company, Samsung, basically reshaped the entire economy of a nation. We're talking about Vietnam.
So let's just start with one number, 20%. What does that mean? Well, by 2019, that was Samsung's slice of Vietnam's entire export pie. That's just a staggering figure, right? It really shows you the sheer scale of influence one company can have on a whole country's economy.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this, we're going to break it down into 4 parts. First, we'll look at the Samsung effect, the investment itself. Then, we'll see the economic boom that followed. After that, we'll dig into some of the hidden costs. And finally, we'll try to weigh it all up.
All right, first up, the Samsung effect. Let's talk about the massive investment that got this whole ball rolling.
And the key thing to grasp here is just how big this was. We're talking over $17 billion that Samsung poured into Vietnam since 2013. They built these huge manufacturing plants. This wasn't just pocket change. This was a nation-building level of investment.
And what happened? Well, the result was a total game changer. Vietnam went from being, kind of on the sidelines to becoming a central global hub for putting together Samsung smartphones. This completely changed its place in the world's electronic supply chain.
So, that massive investment leads us right into our second section, Vietnam's economic boom. Let's look at the positive side of the story and the real measurable impact Samsung had.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because the benefits weren't just in one place. They created a ripple effect. I mean, sure, you have over 100,000 direct jobs, which is huge, but it goes way beyond that. It spurred investment, it fueled that massive export growth we talked about, and it opened the door for local businesses, everything from packaging companies to logistics. It basically pulled the whole domestic economy up into the global big leagues.
And you can really see this in the numbers. Just look at the period from 2013 to 2019. GDP, it shot up from about $214 billion to over $334 billion. And get this, government tax revenues pretty much doubled. That's the boom, right there in black and white.
So everything sounds pretty amazing, right? And a lot of it was, but in economics, there's always a but. You have to ask the critical question whenever you see growth this fast. What are the trade-offs? And that question brings us right to Section 3. Growth's hidden costs. It's time to look at the other side of the coin, the downsides and the dependencies that came with this boom.
So, what are these costs? Well, for one, a huge dependence on a single company. That's risky. Then there's the fact that a lot of the profit, the value added, doesn't stay in Vietnam. It goes back abroad. The wealth that does stay isn't spread out evenly. And on top of that, generous tax incentives meant the government didn't cash in as much as it could have. And of course, there's the environmental impact.
Okay, before we jump back to the data, just a quick primer on a term you're about to see, the Gini coefficient. It sounds complicated, but it's not. It's just a way to measure income inequality. All you need to remember is the higher the Gini number, the bigger the gap between the rich and the poor.
Okay, let's look at that data table again, but this time, zero in on the Gini coefficient. See how it went up from 34.8 to 36.8? Now, that's not a massive leap, but it's statistically significant. It tells us that the income gap was getting wider, likely because all this new money was flowing into just a few specific industrial areas. And it's not just about the economic numbers. There were real-world environmental costs, too. As one report put it, this rapid industrial boom caused some serious environmental stress. Things like soaring energy use, a big strain on local water, and you guessed it, a growing mountain of e-waste.
So we've seen the good and we've seen the bad. That brings us to our final section, weighing the impact. Let's try to put it all together and come to a balanced conclusion about Samsung's role in Vietnam.
When you put it all side by side, the trade-offs are crystal clear. In the positives column, you've got incredible GDP growth, tons of jobs, and Vietnam becoming a major player on the world stage. But in the concerns column, you have that dependency, widening inequality, and environmental stress. It's a classic case of a double-edged sword.
So, what's the final verdict? Well, you'd have to say the overall impact on Vietnam has been positive. The growth and the jobs are just too big to ignore. But, and this is a big but, this whole story is a perfect example of the critical trade-offs that come with development that's driven by foreign investment.
And that really leaves us with the big question, doesn't it? For a country like Vietnam, how do you keep getting all the amazing benefits of this kind of investment? while at the same time finding ways to manage and reduce the very real risks? That's the billion-dollar question that economists and governments all over the world are trying to answer.